Hello and welcome to Top Story. Pope Benedict XVI has arrived in the United States for a 6-day visit he hopes will revive the flagging morale of a US Catholic Church badly damaged by a series of scandals involving sexual abuse by members of the clergy. The Pope said he was deeply ashamed by the scandals and said the Church was now working to exclude paedophiles from the sacred ministry. The Pope received an unprecedented welcome from President George W. Bush, who was at Andrews Air Force Base to meet him on his arrival in the US. Bush is also hosting a welcoming ceremony at the White House to mark Benedict's 81st birthday. But no amount of official goodwill can disguise the fact that the Catholic Church in the US is in crisis. The scandal of the paedophile priest has taken a financial as well as a spiritual toll, costing the Church over $2 billion. Catholics are still the largest religious group in the US, but it's becoming harder to recruit new priests, and many parishes are being forced to close down. Well, joining me now to discuss the papal visit is JeanPierre Denis, who's managing editor of the French Christian weekly La Vie. Thanks very much for being on Top Story. What sort of reception do you think the Pope can expect in the US? After all, this is a country where 23% of the population is Catholic.
On one hand, it's a birthday party, and President George Bush is welcoming very warmly the Pope. And in some way, it's the first time a Pope is so well received in the USA. But on the other hand, it's the most difficult trip any Pope could make in this country, because of course of all the scandals involving the priests, pedophile priests, of course, and also because I think that President George Bush might have the temptation to say, well, this is my Pope because he's against abortion. He's of course President George Bush is more pro-life, and he could be. In some way, he could be well understood by the Pope. But on the other hand, the Pope has to speak about the war, and the Catholics are against the war. Most of the Catholic people in the US are, I think, against the war. So the Church is very conservative on moral issues, of course, pro-life issues. But the Church is very progressive, I would say, very left, is very on the left on the social issues, especially against death penalty, and especially against the war.
If we could go back to the issue of sexual abuse, the Pope said on his way on the flight across to the United States that he felt a great sense of shame at the scandal. Is it possible for him to turn things around for the Catholic Church in the US, because it is clearly badly damaged by this?
Yes, he wanted to change things when he was still Cardinal Ratzinger, and he spoke very clearly at that time. The scandals are belonging to some kind of past period, the 70s and 80s, but the Church still has to first to pay. It's very expensive it's very expensive for the Church, and then the Church has to turn the back to this period. I think the Pope will speak about this, but the scandal will go on for some years, and the image is very important, maybe for the Church in the USA more than anywhere in the world, and the image is still very much damaged, and the Church will pay for it for some years again, I think.
The numbers of the Catholic Church, of course, in the United States have been constantly swollen by the influx of Latinos from Mexico and other places in Central and Southern America. Does that give new lifeblood to the Church, to the Catholic Church?
It's a kind of blood transfusion for the Church. Would it be not the Mexican and Catholic from Hispanic Catholic? I think the Church would be I wouldn't say crashing, but some way the Church would be in much more deeper difficulty. So the Spanish Catholics in a way balance the negative
aspect of this scandal. You mentioned a moment ago the reception that Pope Benedict received from George W. Bush and the fact that he's going to have this birthday party reception as well. Why do you think it is that George W. Bush is going out of his way to give such a big and positive reception to the Pope?
It's interesting because I think in some way still the Pope has a very positive, personally is not involved in any scandal. He is a very moral prayer man, and so he has a very positive image. So maybe for the president, which is the most unpopular president of the recent presidents in the USA, the Pope still has a very positive image personally, so it could benefit to the president himself.
But you also mentioned that he's going to be making this speech at the UN, and it's quite likely that he's going to speak negatively about the US invasion of Iraq. How do you think the President of the United States is going to respond to that?
I'm not sure he will speak only against the war. He might speak quite differently about human rights as the Catholic Church understands the human rights. And maybe he will say the way the Church understands human rights, it's also the rights of the unborn babies. And in that way, we don't know exactly in which direction the Pope will go. Will it be about personal human rights, and then it will be on the moral issues again, or would it be on the social and international issues? And the fact is that the Pope is not very strongly involved in politics. This much less than John Paul II was.
So there's also an ecumenical aspect to this visit as well. That the Pope's going to be meeting religious leaders from the Muslim faith, from the Hindu faith, and from the Jewish faith as well. Is this to be seen in the context of the rows he's had in the past with leaders of the Muslim faith and Hindus as well?
The Pope knows probably that he has to correct in some way the first speech he made, of course, the Ratisbon one, and in the USA people change. The ecumenic aspect, it's quite different from the interfaith aspect. It's not exactly the same thing. People switch from Catholic, people who are Catholic switch and become Protestant, and in the other way, but it's not the same thing.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop us. That's all we have time for today. Thanks to our guest, JeanPierre Denis. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of Top Story. Goodbye.